certainly distinction, therefore, in, say, Bernie's account of Muhammad Tughlaq compared with Shamsiraj Afif's account of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. And there is a difference. So Bernie, despite the fact that he worked with Muhammad Tughlaq for 17 years as his Nadeem, and Shamsiraj Afif writing about Firoz Shah Tughlaq will show the contrast between the two rulers. So Muhammad bin Tughlaq would be emerging as something of a tyrant and completely irrational, despotic, often bloodthirsty, whereas, and therefore, eventually, what we call the failed scheme of Muhammad Tughlaq, failed his schemes. All his schemes would eventually be turned out to be disasters. Whereas Firoz Shah Tughlaq agreeing, okay, let Bengal go, let Deccan go. We have a vast Hindustan. We can run this Hindustan country properly, and therefore, Firoz Shah Tughlaq would be peacefully running the country as Sultan from 1351 to 1388. For some 37 years, he would be ruling, and then perhaps he would be appearing as someone who is something of a successful, model of a ruler compared to the failures of Muhammad Tughlaq. So if we compare, and there is a very interesting author, scholar who does comparative study, Vasilius Cyrus. He has written an article in Studies in History, which is a JNU journal, Studies in History, on contrasting the rule of Muhammad Tughlaq with Firoz Shah Tughlaq, and contrasting it with Bernie's account of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign in his Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi, compared with Shamsiraj Afif's account of the reign of Firoz Shah Tughlaq in his Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi. And the contrast is very stark. Contrast is clear. That contrast is very clear in the sense that Muhammad bin Tughlaq eventually would be admitting his failures. That Muhammad Tughlaq would be saying that I think I should go to Hajj, because now I'm not able to handle these people. I want to chastise them. The more I chastise them, the more rebellious they become. And therefore, he thinks that he should go away for Hajj. But before that, what he should do? Maybe he should appoint Firoz Shah Tughlaq as his successor and make some nobles as ministers who would advise him. And therefore, perhaps it will be an honorable exit for him, Muhammad Tughlaq going for Hajj. But then these tyrants do not give up easily. So Muhammad Tughlaq would say, no, but Firoz Shah is so weak. They will harass him, they will kill him, they will create difficulties for him. So I can't give up like this either. So in the last phase of his life, all this thing was being contemplated by Muhammad Tughlaq in consultation with Bernie, also during the Ush campaign, during the campaign in Sindh. So eventually, Muhammad Tughlaq's reign certainly was seen as something of a disaster compared to the more successful reign of Firoz Shah Tughlaq in his as discussed in Shamsiraj Afif's Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is that some very interesting historical accounts are available to us from the medieval period. In this case, now in Persian, court chronicles, going all the way to 16th, 17th, 18th century. Late 16th century, Akbar's time, we know that Bernie's, Badayuni's, Abdul Qadir Badayuni's Muntakhab al-Tabarikh. We have Nizamuddin Ahmad's very balanced account, of Tabqat-e-Akbari, which is not often talked about. I'll say that Nizamuddin Ahmad's Tabqat-e-Akbari is a very, very important text, should be taken seriously by historians. This predates both Abul Fazl's writing as also Badayuni's writing. And obviously Akbarnama and Ain-e-Akbari are very, very important texts. 17th century, we have once again, a continuation of the Persian Tarikh tradition in a big way, all the way under Jahangir to Shah Jahan. Yes, under Aurangzeb there was no official patronage, but people were writing. People were writing, which perhaps was the end of the 17th century, early 18th century. Many accounts of what was happening in the latter half of the 17th century is available to us. But the most important 18th century account is Persian Tarikh, is this very famous text called Siyarul Mutakhirin, of Ghulam Hussain Tabatabai. It is a very interesting text. Ghulam Hussain Tabatabai's Siyar Mutakri, because it is written in Persian, it is simultaneously translated in English, and it was written for the General, East India Company Governor General Hastings. So it is a Persian history of the latter period, maybe first half of the 18th century. And it is an important account in the sense it is talking about how times have changed now from the late 16th century to 17th century to early 18th century, where the early 18th century Mughal rulers are no longer commanding that kind of respect and authority that, say, Akbar and Jahangir and Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb enjoyed. So therefore, there is this difference being recognized in the latter half of middle of the 18th century, that how Mughals are, time is going to be over for the Mughals now. Though even though we know that from 1707 to 1857, 150 years of long period of decline. But by middle of the 18th century, people were realizing that the times are going to change now. The Mughals are no longer able to handle, commanding authority and control, etc. Maybe some Mughal nobles are more powerful than the Mughal rulers themselves. The Sayyid brothers is explicitly mentioned that the Sayyid brothers could have been better rulers than the Mughal rulers. So these kinds of suggestions are also being made. It was also becoming polemical in the sense of the Shia Sunni business, which is an unfortunate thing when it is politicized, because there are sectarianism, of course, but these issues are also coming up very sharply now in the middle of the 18th century. So we have historical accounts, long history of history writing in India, and in much of it, the emphasis is on direct knowledge and understanding of what exactly happened in terms of the truth relating to the matter. Truth is continuously emphasized. So many people have written about this, so historians of medieval India being discussed in those volumes. Apart from Peter Hardy, I'm also thinking of this very interesting collection. Is becoming old now, two of them. There is a very interesting volume called Historians of India, Pakistan, and Ceylon, which is edited by C.H. Phillips, Historians of India, Pakistan, and Ceylon, edited by C.H. Phillips. This again surveys historical literature in Sanskrit and Pali and different foreign languages, with European languages besides Persian majorly, and then the different Indian vernaculars, so Bengali and Marathi and Tamil will have, Urdu, Hindi will have history writing, which have been surveyed. But I'm also thinking of these couple of books. There is this famous Muhibul Hasan edited book called Historians of Medieval India. I'm sure all of you here in this room will know Historians of Medieval India edited by Muhibul Hasan. This is a famous text. Muhibul Hasan, they had organized a conference in early 1980s, late 70s, in the history and culture department of Jamia Millia Islamia. So this book came out of that. Historians of Medieval India. Once again, this has covered a large number of historians and their writings, which are written about by some very well-known names. All of you would know them. There is a chapter on Amir Khosrow by Sayyid Hasan Askari, who was Patna's top historian for a long time, some 60, 70 years. Sayyid Hasan Askari was a person who would be working all the time in Khuda Bakhsh Library, Patna. Then we have also here a chapter by K. Nizami, Khalil Ahmad Nizami, on Ziauddin Barni, once again. Khalil Ahmad Nizami was a top medieval India Sufism in medieval India person in Aligarh History Department. Muhibul Hasan, whose son Mushirul Hasan becomes very famous subsequently. He has written on writings in medieval Kashmir. There is a chapter by Romila Thapar on Kalhan. And Kalhan is very important. Kalhan's Raj Tarangani is very important. I must say, the kind of thing that we talk about, the responsibilities of the historians to cull out the truth relating to the past and narrative-wise in a manner that sounds very interesting, etc., has all been written in the first part of Kalhan's Raj Tarangani. It is a fine. Everyone should read it. Kalhan's Raj Tarangani. It's available in Hindi translation. It's available also in two separate English translation. It is the finest exposition on what exactly historians do. So historians talk about the past. Historians talk about the past on the basis of their study of the past. Historians study the past on the basis of the sources relating to the past. Sources of all kinds, whether they are in the form of buildings and monuments, to inscriptions, to orders, to texts, to different kinds of, documents. All of these are studied, examined by historian for the historian to become intelligible about, informed about what exactly happened in a particular period, and then narrativize the past, relate the past, narrate the past, and write about the past. So this is what, and write the past without any kind of prejudices, any kind of biases, any kind of ill will towards anyone. Write about it in the fine language. In this case, fine language of poetry, because it is a versified text. It is not a prose text, Sanskrit verse. So he would say that only the finest poet would be able to narrativize events of the past in such a way that it would appear as if events are happening in front of the reader, in front of the listener, etc. So that emphasis. So Kalhan has been studied, by several of them, several scholars. A.L. Basham has written about him. Rumila Thapar has written about him. In recent times, Chitralekha Joshi has a book on Kashmir's historical tradition, along with several articles on Raj Tarangani. So perhaps that can be of some interest to some of you here. There are also chapters by other people, Qiyamuddin Ahmad on Mirza Nathan, H.K. Sherwani on histories of the Qutub Shahi dynasty from Golconda, on Babur. Babur's own Baburnama is such an important text, historical text. Babur knew about Hindustan then in the 16th century more than what we know about Hindustan today.
Today, yes, sir.
He was so very well informed, and he's writing on a day-to-day basis about what all he has observed, what he all knows, and eventually goes into the making of this Tuzke Baburi, the Baburnama we know of. It is available in English translation. It is available in Hindi translation. It is available in Persian translation. It was written in Chagatai Turkish. So there is no dearth of reading. Badayuni, Abdul Qadir Badayuni, much as he is condemned as a fanatical mullah, etc., Badayuni is very, very important for offering a sharp critique of Akbar's religious policy, etc., from the traditional Sunni Muslim point of view, but very important nonetheless. And Badayuni has been studied here by Muhammad Mujib in his article in this book. Then also there is a chapter by Sayyid Athar Abbas Rizvi on Tarikh Alfi. Numan Ahmad Siddiqui has written on Sheikh Abul Fazl. Then a couple of interesting articles on the 18th century historiography by Aligarh historians Zahiruddin Malik and Muhammad Umar. They were faculty. Persian historiography in India during the 18th century by Zahiruddin Malik and Muhammad Umar on Muhammad Qasim and Khafi Khan. Khafi Khan, Muntakhabul Lubab is a very famous text. Then there are other chapters on history writings in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Then there is a chapter by Zaul Hasan Farooqi, who was a professor of
post literature.
Sir Sayyid and Maulana Shibli. Then there are other people. So there are some very fine work on historiography in medieval India. All of you would also be knowing about Harbans Mukhya, who was retired as a professor. Harbans Mukhya's historians and historiography during the reign of Akbar is very famous. There is a early chapter in the Sultanate historiography also. Mukhya considers himself as a friend of Abul Fazl. So he is so fascinated by Abul Fazl that he thinks that he is something of a friend of Abul Fazl. So we see that there is a huge literature that is historical literature that is used by in Sanskrit and Persian, that is by historians in modern times and recognized by historians in modern times as very, very important work. But I will also say that the same is true of the vernaculars. Vernacular, say Bengali vernacular writings. Bengali writings are very, very important, and we see that. I think I have some 10-15 minutes time to continue to speak. I'll just focus briefly on the vernacular. So Mangal Kavya, for instance, in Bangla, is a very, very important text dedicated to the Bengali goddesses. And one of the finest scholars of historians of the Mangal Kavya is this professor in Washington, Western Washington University, but he was a PhD under Bernard Cohn in Chicago University. David Curley. David Curley's study of Mangal Kavya is very, very interesting. I show you the book. It's called Poetry and History, Bengali Mangal Kavya and Social Change in Pre-Colonial Bengal. David Curley. This is a book. This is quite interesting. I will say that this is one of the examples which shows how literature can be used for the writing of history. Literature can be used for the writing of history in such a way that some very important set of information can be used, can be brought in, culled from such texts, in this case as Mangal Kavya, for writing history. Not only religious history, because this is a religious text, Chandi Mangal and Anumata Mangal, several texts dedicated to Bengali goddesses have been studied by him, especially Chandi Mangal. I think there are 3 chapters on Chandi Mangal, and it is possible using religious texts, religious literature for writing. This brings us back to this question of interrelationship between literature and history, and how historians have used literature for the writing of history. Using literature for writing of history. This they have done in with reference to Bangla. This reference to the- for Bangla, there is another historian, very fine historian called Kumkum Chatterjee. Kumkum Chatterjee is this is a book by Kumkum Chatterjee. Is called The Cultures of History. The Cultures of History in Early Modern India, Persianization and Mughal Culture in Bengal. Kumkum Chatterjee. This is a very interesting work in the sense that once again it is using Bengali historical texts to talk about the kind of history that was happening in the 17th century, 18th century period, especially this idea of Persianization. Her argument is that maybe history of the older kind was in circulation in Bangla and Sanskrit in Bengal, but after the Mughal conquest, there is a Persianization of Bengal, and that Persianization is also seen in the writing of history in Bengal. So increasingly now, Bengali historical writing is going to be more this worldly, more factual, more chronology driven, less mythical, less legendary, and more with reference to why, the causation, why things happen, etc. That is explained that is to be seen in Persian Tariq tradition. So therefore, there is a Persianization of Itihas tradition in Bengal after the Mughal conquest. So there is a very clear influence of Persian culture, Persianization, Persian knowledge system in Bengal from the late 16th century, especially onwards, but 17th century, 18th century, you see there is a Persianization. But we also know at the same time, by 1830s, there is a massive Anglicization of Bengal. So there is Raja Ram Mohan Rai and all that. They abandon Persian and Turkish and Arabic and Urdu, the traditional knowledge, to Westernize themselves, Anglicize themselves. They understand that the old world of Persian and Muslim and Islam, etc., is going to be over now. It is going to be British and modern and Western, etc. So they just abandon everything in favor of becoming modern, becoming colonial modern. colonial modern. So, but before that, for 200 years, we see that there is a very heavy Persianization in Bengal, to the extent that even now Bengali, you find is Bengali is very heavily Persianized even now. Every other word in Bangla is a Persian word with a particular slang, twist given, etc. Any word that you think of, it's most likely either it is Persian or perhaps of Sanskrit, maybe some English word. And if you remove English and Persian and Sanskrit, then Bangla becomes Santhal. So that becomes older tribal, language. So but for our purpose here, this cultures of history in early modern India, Persianization and Mughal culture in Bengal by Kumkum Chatterjee is a very, very important work, once again showing what were the different forms of history writing before the colonial modern period, in which we find that only modern Western kind of approach to the writing of history was privileged. So what happened then is, during the colonial period and after, is that these older forms were pushed into the public domain, and our history became more and more Western oriented, colonial, modern, Western oriented. But these histories had a life of their own in the public domain. And so from Sanskrit to uh, to Persian to vernacular, we find the three different forms, but not exclusive. They were in conversation with each other. They were not separate boxes. That we see that in the public domain, people have sense of history, the genealogy of which goes back to medieval and ancient period. So our modern history is taught in our institution, but the public history goes back to the medieval and ancient past of societies, of regions, different regions, etc. Different regions have different languages. Those languages have literature. That literature is also talking about the past. So there is a historical literature in the public domain, which we do not take cognizance of here. In our Delhi University, I'm sure in Aligarh also, what are the regional histories which are taught? What regional histories? What we teach is all national history. So maybe one paper on Deccan history.
Deccan, Sharkis of Jaunpur, Sharkis of Jaunpur.
Sharkis of Jaunpur will then be short-lived, and soon we find that the Sharkis are gone, and Jaunpur is part of the larger North Indian history.
Delhi
The North Indian history becomes part of our national history. Our national history has to be broad-based. It should be inclusive, but the specificities of the regions. Do we have in our national institutions history of Punjab, or history of Rajasthan, or history of Gujarat, or history of Bengal, or history of the northeastern region of India? Occasionally we find there is a rubric, there will be a rubric in a national paper of something happening in Maharashtra or something in Bengal, etc. But in those regions, when we go in those regions, we see that people are very conscious of their history. So Maharashtra people will be very conscious of their history, as Tamil people will be very conscious of their history, or Bengal people will be conscious of their history. Now, those consciousness with regard to regional history is important for their identity, for their politics, for their, what they are. And whether there is enough space for those regional histories in our national history is a concern. So how do we deal with this? So what happens then, that because our national history and our modern professional history does not give enough space to regional history, regions assert themselves as something of their own, their own history. So for them, their regional identity and regional literature, regional history becomes more important. So then at some point of time, these difficulties will come to the public domain, and then the public domain would be completely vitiated, in the sense that our modern history is not able to handle those regional concerns, as our modern history is not able to handle the communal concerns, the religious concerns, and there are other or linguistic concerns, for instance. Our modern history has to be in English, whereas English is not our language. Why should I be speaking for 2 hours in English to students in Aligarh? Why not in Urdu, or why not in Hindi? But we know that our modern history is not in Urdu Hindi. Our modern history is international history. And our
Yes, yes.
international history has to be discussively in English. And therefore, we have to do this. Now, so how do we give space to the regional histories then? Obviously, regional histories will be important in their own regions. And we have to respect the importance of regional histories in their own regions and recognize them as important in themselves. So the same goes for Hindi, Urdu. Hindi, we have some fine scholars in working with historical Hindi literature. Alison Bush was a very fine scholar working on 16th, 17th, 18th century Hindi literature. She wrote a book called Poetry of Kings, the classical Hindi literature of Mughal India. Her argument is, much as Hindi is identified with the Hindi belt of North India and maybe with Hindu identity now, but classical period of Hindi literature is the Mughal period. Much as the Mughal Persian sources and documents, etc., history is emphasized, but that was official. Unofficial, you'll find everything is Hindi. Agra, Fatehpur Sikri, these are center of the Braj Mandal, Braj speaking people. So people are speaking Braj, where we have a fort. Inside the fort is a palace. Inside that is also a court. And court language is Persian. But the region is all Braj speaking. So formally in the Farman or in the history of Abul Fazl, it's all High Persian, but the public is all Hindi. And public is singing poetry in Hindi, whether it is bhakti poetry or whether it is riti poetry. So therefore, Hindi is the classical period of Hindi literature is Mughal period. And because Mughal historians are so obsessed with Persian documents and Persian sources that they do not recognize the presence of the Hindi domain. And Hindi domain is very, very important. As soon as I'm through with my formal lecture, I also break into Hindi or Hindustani.
Yes, sir.
No, we do not recognize this importance of Hindi or Urdu or Hindustani, or say in Bengal, Bangla, or in Maharashtra, Marathi, or wherever the languages are. So there is therefore a disconnect. Our modern professional disciplinary history of the kind we are doing here in our university is in English, even though English is not our language. Whereas histories in the public domain regions are being done in Urdu, Hindi, Marathi, Punjabi, Rajasthani, Gujarati, any language that we know of throughout India. As I said, southern India, Marathi, Telugu, Kannada, Tamil, Malayalam, these are the languages. Or Odia, Bangla, Assamese, these are the languages. Kashmiri, Punjabi, Rajasthani, Sindhi, Baluchi, Pashto, these are the languages in which people think, in which people sing, in which people talk about what happened to them in the past and what is happening to them in the present. All of this is part of the literary culture. All of this is part of historical culture. And not much of it is taken cognizance of in our academic writing. So therefore, there is a lacuna in our historical writing. There is a lack, that our historical conversation does not take into account what large majority of people are thinking, whether they think in Bhojpuri or whether they think in Awadhi or whether they think in Braj or whatever are the languages. So these are the concerns with regard to the sources of the languages of the sources also, that we have to have a good historian need to know 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 languages in which there will be sources, and those sources should be studied properly, examined properly, authenticated properly for culling out evidence, such evidence which is recognized by historians as factual kind, and then write history on the basis of that. So this is a major challenge, that our research scholars should know 3 or 4 or 5 languages for them to become good historians also. So just one language will not do. Someone knows Urdu, but no English, no Persian, no Hindi, nothing. Someone knows English only and no other language. So how is that going to be? So depending upon what is the topic of a research of a scholar, 1 or 2 or 3, 4 languages are required. Without languages, we cannot properly speak. And if we can't speak, then what are we going to do? So reading and writing, and speaking, these should be the abilities of us research scholars, which this training we are not getting in our institutions. Not proper language training is not happening. And proper language training is very, very important. You know, and not one language only. So how do we deal with this? Which means that research scholars program needs to be more rigorous, more demanding, which is often not the case. So I will say what I will do is that through these many examples of pre-modern forms of history writing in Sanskrit and Persian and vernaculars, and the need for knowing sources from different languages, etc., all different kinds of sources to be analyzed in such a way that we are not doing politics here. We are understanding the past in as much as possible intellectually, historically, as part of knowledge production. And it is done in such a manner that it is a scholarly exercise, it is an academic scholarly exercise, it is not a political exercise, etc. And we ensure through our consciousness as historians that we need to be responsible and we need to be credible. And this credibility is about objectivity. And that objectivity will be possible only when the reading public, scholars in the fraternity recognize that you as a historian is credible. You are saying things which is not dictated by the political, which is not dictated by any group politics, which is not dictated by any ideology, which is not biased in favor of any identity, any identity. We know we are concerned here presently about Hindu-Muslim identity or caste identity or linguistic identity, etc. Now, if these identities are more important and influence our writing of history, then we are not doing our work properly. Our scholarship has to be beyond and above these kinds of concerns. And this is a challenge because we cannot completely cut ourselves off also from the challenges of the time. So what the response should be that we set our standards so high in terms of our scholarship that, like philosophers do, philosophers try to cut themselves off from the present in such a way that they go deep into their field of inquiry, that when they come out of their research, they speak at a register which ordinary people don't understand, and only scholars understand. So just as philosophers do, even historians can also do that. That historians should be in a position to talk about their research, results of their research in such a manner that it is not immediately available to, intelligible to the public, because this is a scholarly exercise, and yet the results of this research should also at the same time be disseminated to the public. So through textbooks, maybe in college textbooks, school textbooks, and through occasional interventions by historians in the public domain through those mediums of television, and newspapers, televisions, etc. So sometimes it's good that our top historians appear in television interviews and say things authoritatively, or they are interviewed in newspapers and magazines to say things authoritatively. And yet we are not doing politics here. We are talking about the results of our research. Results of our research, which is relevant to the time perhaps, but we are not dictated by the time either. So how do we make this distinction? We can make this distinction only through a very heavy investment in research. That we are just concerned about our research and library and archives and source and evidence and facts, and we are not immediately concerned about what is happening in the public domain. And yet we cannot cut off ourselves from the public domain either. So this is a challenge. I think I stop now. If there are any questions I can take, can respond to, and else.
Yes, sir. Your lecture is open for discussion. Please come ahead. आइए आप लोग क्वेश्चन करें. जो रिसर्च कर रहे हैं कम से कम उनके लिए बहुत जरूरी है, हमारे लिए भी जरूरी है, सबके लिए।
Sir, I have a question.
हाँ नायरा प्लीज।
Sir, I came across two of your articles that you published in Sunday Guardian newspaper in December 2014 and January 2015, in which the heading was "History Writing Must Be Dispassionate," and the other read "Competing Claims Often Destroy Study of History." Could you please throw some light on that?
Huh. So I was just yes. So yeah. So you will have some sense of deja vu in the sense that the things that I'm saying today, you will find that is some bits are written there also. That uh,
Yes, sir.
how how it is important that historians should be seen to be doing their historical research seriously, as say as say a philosopher does his work, or as say a literary scholar does his work. When we are writing history, we have to ensure that our interpretations are not colored by, not dictated by, not shaped by political demands and political concerns. So in that sense, it has to be dispassionate, not passionate but dispassionate, in the sense of being in the sense of an intellectual exercise, in the sense of an exercise that is scholarly, exercise which is not necessarily emotional, scholarly exercise. So why are we here in this room, 12, 13 people? We are here because we want to learn things. We learn things because it's going to be part of our profession as historians. So a professional historian, the objective of a professional historian is to learn things as part of knowledge, and not so much as part of any political interests. So no one has paid us to come to this room. We have come to this room because we want to discuss history. We want to discuss history as objectively as possible, intellectually, in a manner that is scholarly, as part of knowledge production, as part of our training as historians. So you as research scholars, you might be doing MPhil or PhD. You as research scholars, you are training yourself as a historian. So this is a professional activity. It is not a emotional political activity. So therefore historians need to be scholarly and objective and credible, and not emotional and passionate as a political performance would be. So we are not here into political performance. We are here into our training as historians, for us to be able to speak authoritatively about the past as historians. So this is the one concern. The other concern is, if historians are subscribing to particular ideologies, as I said, ideologies defending colonialism, ideologies defending imperialism of different kinds, or ideologies defending different kinds of religious positions, say Hindu-Muslim thing. So then these different kinds of ideological positions which break into our historical research and try to influence historical research eventually distort historical research. So everyone begins to look at history from the perspective of or gloss of particular ideologies. Some people have got red blinkers, some green blinkers, some different saffron blinkers. So if we begin to look at history from the point of view of saffron blinkers, with saffron blinkers or red or green or whatever color you choose, then obviously you get to see only those colored aspect that you want to see, and therefore historical writing accordingly gets colored. So saffronized history, Marxist history, colonial history, imperial history. So I give you one example. Richard Drayton is a very fine scholar. If you search for him, Richard Drayton, you will get his article. Richard Drayton is a historian in the UK. He has written an article on how there are scholars, senior professors of history in UK universities. Some of them are also knighted historians, so Sir such and such historians, Sir Chris Bailey, Sir C.A. Bailey, Sir different historians, some of them are justifying colonialism and imperialism in the 18th, 19th century by saying the colonized people, such as Indian people, should realize that colonialism was not entirely a bad thing to have happened to them in the 18th, 19th century. They actually seriously believe. And then they begin to give example of how because of colonialism, if you go to India, you see wherever you go, Indian people speak such good English. And that Indian people could not have learned such good English if colonialism had not happened. so Indian English, you will know, is better than British English. So British people do not speak such good English as Indian people do. So they say that look at Indian people speaking English. Look at Indian history departments. Look at Indian universities. So Delhi University, JNU, Calcutta University, your Aligarh University, they will think that these are possible. These have been only possible because colonialism happened in the 19th century and 20th century, first half of the 20th century. And we know that our history departments they're all established within the colonial period. These are all, our history departments are all just about 100 years old. So our history departments are not 1,000 years old.
Yes, sir.
So they want to take credit for our modern institutions and our modernity. And therefore they also say, look at the Indian people, how well dressed they are. Especially they like girls wearing very fine dress. Indian girls look very good. So they say that and Indian girls speak better English than the British girls. So then they'll say that how look at these advances and achievements of Indian people because of colonialism. So if they assume that if colonialism had not happened, Indian people would remain pre-modern. If they're pre-modern, which means that they would be something like the barbarians of the older times. They were modernized through colonial modernity. And therefore, they should recognize the value that was added to the life of the people when they were colonized in the late 18th, early 19th. Macaulay's views would be that he wanted Indian people who look Indians, but think like Europeans, think like British, etc. So this is completely bogus because if the British people were similarly today in the 21st century, we are going to be colonized by the Afghan people, that the Afghanistan army from Afghanistan goes to England and conquers England and teaches Persian to people. And then back in Iran and back in Afghanistan, the Persian people are very proud that the English people are now speaking Persian. So that would be completely absurd. So similarly, in this case, what happens is that if a historian begins to think, or a set of historians begin to think that think of history through the ideology of politics, in this case of imperialism, British imperialism, colonialism, etc., means that the history they will present will be completely distorted. We know through Eliot and Dawson's translation of Persian sources, history of India is stored by so many historians, etc. So we know that how they have tried to distort history in favor of their ideology. Now, if our historical research is distorted by ideology for reasons political, then it is no longer history. It becomes political propaganda. And therefore, that political propaganda will only last till that politics lasts. So once that politics is over, that political propaganda will also be redundant. But in our scholarship, we have ensured that we are propaganda free. Our historical research is not propaganda. And we should be conscious of it all the time. That much as we value certain kinds of politics, say we would like to value secular politics. But in the interest of secular politics, if we do not recognize that there are religious tensions in our society, competitiveness in our society, there is religious violence in our society, religious conflict in our society, then we are not doing justice to our history and society. So we need to recognize that. And that is a challenge. That whether our history writing should be free from ideology and whether our history is free from pressures of identity consciousness and whether we can become professional historians. And professional historians are not passionate, they are dispassionate. Like the doctors, you will know, doctors consider someone, some close relative is in a pain, we take it to the doctor. Doctor thinks it is a subject, it is a subject for them, it is a case for them. And they handle it very, very calmly, coolly, as something that needs to be cured. But similarly, for us, different sets of sources need to be handled in such a way that we come to understand what exactly was going on here. So doctors also do postmortem. We as historians also do postmortem. So doctors do postmortem of the body in the present. We do postmortem of what happened in the past. And we have to do it objectively. We have to do it credibly. We have to do it as an intellectual exercise and not as an emotional political exercise. Got
Sir,
it?
Okay, thank you, sir.
sir, you are saying that a student should be he should avoid politics. This was pointed out by Ziavarni also. In the 14th century, he said that a student should be avoid flattery and flatterers both. हाँ, फ्लैटरी से बचने के लिए कहा भाई, जो फ्लैटरी एंड पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ टुडे इज द सेम थिंग, आई थिंक सर.
So I'm making a distinction in the sense that we, all of us 13 people here, we cannot be free from presence of the politics around us. All of us are also political beings because we are part of the time. Okay? Our time is not free from political domination, control, etc. And yet our research and writing should be free from those pressures of the political. So we are not going to be completely depoliticized, and yet we make a distinction that when we are into the past of the material from 6th century BCE or 16th century or 18th century or 19th century, whatever period topic that we work on, we have to be conscious of this fact that our current politics and our commitment to politics of a particular kind in the present should not influence our interpretation of the sources from the past. Yes. Whether this is possible, I will say it is not entirely impossible. That what we are writing as history, what we are reading as history should not necessarily be always influenced by, dictated by directly politics in the present. And yet we cannot escape from the politics of the present either.
Yes, sir.
And yet we need to make a distinction that of all the politics going on here, say in our history department, there's so much politics. Everyone is a politics, 40 different kinds of politics. Can't we make a distinction that we are not part of any politics? And when we are taking a stand regarding what happened in the past, we do not talk politics, we talk history. That our historical interpretation is not deliberately colored by our position in the present politically.
Yes, sir.
Our position in our understanding of the past, interpretation of the past, discussion of the past, is not directly dictated by the political. If it is directly dictated by the political, it becomes propaganda. But if it is raised to a level which is theoretical, philosophical, deeply historical, and above all kinds of politics, it is historical research of a high order.
Yes, sir.
So that distinction is very, very clearly understood, that of all the politics going on around us, in our departments, in our society, in our state, district, state, country, etc., yet we have the ability to rise above the politics of the time, to be able to speak at a level and register which is deeply historical and which addresses large concerns and not merely a particular line of inquiry. A particular line of inquiry that is politically controlled, politically articulated. Our research is controlled by, guided by the sources. Sources from the past. Sources from the politics of the past, which was different from what is happening in the present.
Yes, sir.
And yet, because all history is contemporary history, all questions are coming to our mind because of the context of the time, we are not completely depoliticized either. So 20th century politics was leading to 20th century history. 21st century politics is leading to 21st century history. And yet we are making this distinction that what we are doing is not politics here. What we are doing is a historical exercise, intellectual exercise, a scholarly exercise which is limited to the 12 people around us here. Because what I'm saying will not be understandable to people in the bazaar. If this language that I'm speaking, I speak to Aligarh railway station or New Delhi railway station, people will think, what are they talking? Mad people. They will think we are mad people, we're talking something. उन्हीं में से कुछ बदमाश लोग होंगे जो हमारी लैंग्वेज को समझ रहे होंगे.
यस सर.
और वो कहेंगे आप ऐसे कैसे बात कर सकते हैं कि पॉलिटिक्स इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, हमारे तो नेता इतना अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं, ये सब तमाशा बोलना शुरू करेंगे. So we tell them that we are not talking to you. We are talking among ourselves as historians. And we are talking amongst ourselves as historians to also in social sciences people, also in literature people, also to some scientists who are interested in history and take us seriously.
Sir, yes, sir. This led what you are saying right now. This led Ziauddin Barni to say that the justice with history can only be done with akabire dino dunya, noble and aristocrats. He was saying.
So we make a distinction from Barni also, because Barni was an aristocrat.
Yeah,
and Barni was addressing to the public, which was part of the political discourse of the time. So Barni was not addressing the bazaar people. Barni was, as you say, he is not speaking to low-bound people. He is not speaking to the public at large. Okay. But here now we no longer make this distinction of low bound, high bound, this caste, that caste. So what we will say that we are speaking. Bernie would also say that if some low bound people want to write history, no one will read their history. That history book will be sold to Kabadiwala. Kabadiwala will recycle the paper for writing better history that of the kind that Bernie has written. And he says that Bernie does not need even to show any proof for what he's written, because Bernie is credible, because he comes from a very high aristocratic background. So then he would also claim that he has made, that if I claim that history of the kind that I have written, no one else can write. There's no other book of history of the kind that I have written. He says, if I make such a claim, then no one will understand this, because no one is capable of understanding this, So just one second.
Personal issues. अरे मजहर भाई हैं क्या? मजहर भाई चलिए.
I think he'll come back.
He will come back. So Naira, under whom supervision you are carrying out your research?
I'm working under Wasim, sir.
Wasim Raja? Acha. So you are working on Kashmir?
No, sir. I'm working on racism in colonial North India during 19th century.
Acha, racism. Okay, that is a very important topic, because racism was prevalent during the colonial period. Even B.A. Smith's history hai, that was the part, Naira.
Yes, sir.
Uska agar aap, if you go through his writing, you will find that कि वो अपने आप को इतना सुपीरियर मानते हैं कि वो कहते हैं कुछ है ही नहीं.
Yes, sir.
रजी सर का वेट करेंगे. विलायत इज देयर. विलायत लोग यार सवाल. वालेकुम सलाम. सवाल करो सर से सवाल करो. माइक्रो प्रॉब्लम्स ऑफ राइटिंग हिस्ट्री था ना टॉपिक. तो माइक्रो स्टडी क्या है, माइक्रो हिस्ट्री राइटिंग में क्या प्रॉब्लम्स आती हैं सर, ये सब?
So maybe they will take more time to think, and perhaps I've spoken enough. 12, 15, 16 already.
हाँ, if any query, any question from the audience, scholars, please. सर माइक्रो स्टडी को लेके जो है थोड़ा सा प्रॉब्लम्स ऑफ micro study. If any person carries out research in regional history, so what type of problems he or she could may face?
So first thing is the sources. Whether sources are available, say sources of the kind that was available for a historian in France, or for writing a history of a village in France in the 16th century, for a historian writing in the 20th century. Whether we have that kind of archive for writing, say, a history of a locality, a small locality, whether we have that kind of archive, and whether how we can show whether the experience of a locality, of a village, of a very small community for that matter, how relevant it is for the larger concerns, larger general concerns, both in terms of history and historiography. So here both concerns, that what history that you are writing on the basis local history, micro history you are writing, is relevant for understanding the history of that period in the larger sense, and how that study, that micro history that you do, is relevant for our conversation in the present with regard to history writing. So if we are in a position to write such a history that is historically important and historiographically also relevant in the present, and for which we have enough archives that we can write 300 pages, that perhaps would then be a good exercise of the kind that has been possible, say in France, say Annals, School of Historiography, they have done it, and in our case, for instance, in the 16th, 17th, 18th century period or earlier to this, what large corpus we have for writing a history of that kind. So it is possible that if someone is working on the 18th century or 19th century period, because of the more recentness of the time, 19th, 20th century, say some village records, some Pargana records, some local documents, which are so very critical for understanding the place, the village, the locality, or the district, etc., that on the basis of which one can build a larger narrative, a meta narrative. So even if the material is coming from a village or locality or town or a particular region, but the significance of the history of the region that is emerging on the basis of those sources is so large that other people can also understand that it is so very relevant. So that is one way of thinking. Whether we have sources and whether we have ability to interpret those sources in such a way that a larger history can be written on the basis of a local history. So this macro connections with reference to both training as historians and availability of the sources is important.
Sir, we could produce sources through physical surveys if they are in right methods.
Yeah, so for more recent history, as I said, for more recent history, history in the last 200 years perhaps, it is possible that we can, we are in a position to collect enough material for us to be able to, from a region, a village, a district, for us to be able to say, build a larger narrative. But if we are not in a position to build a large narrative on the basis of a local material and connect that material with the larger history, larger macro history, then there will be difficulty. But you're right that if we are doing field work, and we are also looking at reports, district reports, gazetteers, uh, we are looking at, say, studying a building. As I said, say studying a dargah in a village and
Yes, sir.
writing a history of that dargah and village and community and society, going back to 16th century or 14th century. Then certainly it will be an exercise in microhistory with larger significance, because then it will be connected with the older forms, larger forms, etc. So there are certainly interesting possibility. One particular side, one, in this case, say dargah or anything, is. But people will ask you, what is the significance? What is the relevance? What is the significance? As we know, we have faced it all. What is the relevance of your topic? What is the significance of your topic? Significance of your topic. So that kind of the ability to answer this thing, make it relevant, make it significant, even if it is very micro. If we are in a position to do so, it will be people are doing this, but this has been done. Some people are doing here also, but this certainly has been done in a big way in European history. Uh, History of France, history in Europe, other places. Very, very micro concerns with larger micro, concerns with larger significance or connections with the larger history, meta history, etc. Not impossible, but sources. First thing is sources for us, because unless we have sources,
Yes, yes.
how are we going?
At least gazetteers and other primary sources.
Gazetteers, imperial gazette, modern gazetteers, imperial gazetteers, district reports, surveys. Surveys are so. These are available from the 19th century, from the roughly from around middle of the 19th century onwards. Before that, also there will be difficulty. Therefore, before that, then we get into colonial archives. So colonial archives will say things that the colonial government wanted us to believe in. Okay. We know government data wants to tell us only what it wants to tell us. So not whether this government or that government, so beyond a point, the colonial archives would not be helpful. Even as we know, our modern history is almost entirely based on colonial archives. The subaltern studies historians also went to the colonial archives, said we will read against the grain, etc. They said, read against the grain. So, but then we have to agree that the British only wanted people to believe in certain things, and those documents accordingly were shaped. So therefore, how much dependence is recommended on the colonial records for writing the period, history of the period? This is we're not going to say enough. That's why we'll say that it's better to go into literature than, popular literature, the literature of the kind that.
Local chronicles, yes, sir.
So local chronicles, etc.
Okay.
We are almost there, 12:24 now.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Because I'm very glad to hear you, sir, for the first time. So I was very excited, rather. So thank you very much for enlightening us, sir. Our scholars, especially research scholars, they might be getting benefit from your lectures, your advice and queries, your observations you have made. And I'm very hopeful they will be getting a lot of benefit, academic benefit from a research point of view. Thank you very much, sir. I invite you in advance, sir, on 5th of February.
Okay.
तो हम लोग से ऑर्गेनाइजिंग कमेटी में हैं, तो प्लीज
I will come for one day. I will come for one day.
Yes, sir. Grace the occasion of international seminar on the medieval Indian history. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.